Good evening, good morning, good night, whatever the case may be. It's your favorite history teacher in all of Alabama, probably the world. It's me, it's Coach Hughes. Welcome into another fun-filled, exciting lecture. We are going to continue our discussion on the ancient Greeks, Athens, Sparta, just to name a few. So, where we left off in section 2, we were talking about the mighty Persians and really their rise to prominence in this area and near Greece. And what it really did was it was kind of a buildup. Persians had a well organized, disciplined military. And with Cyrus the Great, also known as Cyrus the Dose, Cyrus the Second, he started to expand their empire really. And when he made the Persians rise out of ashes, knocking over city state after city state like dominoes. If you set up dominoes and ever knocked them over before, he really put them on a collision course between them and mainland Greece, which two of the most prominent city states, Athens and Sparta, kind of rose up. Even though Athens and Sparta really didn't like each other, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And Athens and Sparta kind of joined forces in the Persian Wars to defeat the mighty Persians. Well, after the Persian Wars, we had two great city states. You had Athens, who used their brains, their thinking power, and you had the mighty Spartans. Kind of like Hulk Hogan. What you gonna do when you see the 24-inch pythons on you, brother? My best Hulk Hogan impersonation there. So, really, when you have these two powers, you kind of put them on a collision course. Remember, they don't really like each other to begin with. It was the enemy of my enemy is my friend, but when that enemy is gone, there's nobody else. You're just my enemy. So we're going to get started with section 2 lecture here and kind of go through this PowerPoint today to maybe give you a little bit better understanding of the city-states of Athens and Sparta. So let's talk about Sparta. Sparta first. Now, Spartan life was dominated by the army. Courage, strength, the highest values there. They were all involved, all immersed in strength and power, physical strength and power. To the degree, Circle B, that unhealthy babies were taken outside the city and left to die. If there was something, physically wrong, maybe mentally wrong with a child, they wanted to get it out of the bloodline. They wanted purity. They wanted power, muscles, and strength. And as condemning as it sounds, this was their way of life. Now, boys who survived were trained from an early, and I do mean early age, to be soldiers, to be combatants, to fight in the military with their strength. How early did you say? Oh, sorry for the picture there of myself. But Spartans created a strong military of boys to men by starting them at an early, and I do mean early age, to train them military-wise. Now, boys entered the military, if you can believe this, quiz question, test question, at the age of 7. At the age of 7, is this thing on? At the age of 7, boys entered the military in Sparta at age 7 and started training, if you can believe that. Now, if you're trying to do the math there, my son currently is 6 and he's in kindergarten. So you're talking about first grade. Can you imagine what you yourself were doing about first grade? I can guarantee you were probably not starting to train for a military. They were physically fit They didn't have necessarily what you call weights or a exercise program today, but to keep their physical appearance up, boys ran, they jumped, they swam, they threw javelins to build up those 24-inch pythons. Probably not 24-inch pythons, to increase their strength. They were a physical specimen, to say the least. At age 20, they've been training since seven. Since seven. At age 20, they entered the regular army, and they were really a force to be reckoned with. They lived in the barracks for about 10 years, so 20 to 30, most people's prime there, and they returned home at age 30, but they served in the military all the way until age 60. And a lot of people just didn't live a long life back at this time period. So you're talking basically your whole life as a male that you are serving in the military there in Sparta. Now, because Spartan men were often away at war, Spartan women actually had more rights than any other Greek woman or any other Greek city-state that women would be involved in. And this is pretty impressive because I always tell my girls in class, I said, you kind of build up the role, ladies, of being the caretakers, raising the children, household chores, things like that. If you ever get in a time machine and you want to go experience one of these ancient cultures, you probably are better off if you're a female to go to ancient Egypt, which we've already talked about, or Sparta here because of the rights they offered you. For example, women owned much of the land in Sparta, and since the men were away, they lived in the barracks, they fought in the military, they did have that opportunity to have the final say-so in how their households were run. Now, Spartan girls, as you can imagine, they too needed to be physical. They needed to be athletic. They were trained in sports to become healthy mothers. Why? Because healthy mothers equal healthy Spartan boys or Spartan women. But more importantly, for the military emphasis here, boys. Women also learned how to run, jump, wrestle, throw the javelins, and even competed with men in sporting events. Listen to that last one. Even competing with men in sporting events. Nowhere in ancient civilization are you going to have this competition, this equality almost between men and women. Now, to obtain more land, Spartans, they simply conquered their neighbors, calling them helots or helots, however you want to say it. And to keep the helots from rebelling, the Spartans created a strong military prowess. They too, like the Persians, were well disciplined, well trained, physically dominant in their category there. Slaves, they did capture slaves. They did make people become slaves. Slaves grew the city's crops and did many of the other jobs, as you can imagine, since a majority of the men were living in the barracks, serving in the military, the women running the households. It was up to the slaves to kind of run the crops. And remember, Greece is just not great geographically because a lot of their food sources come from trading, and outside of the mainland Greece there, since they live on that peninsula, a lot to do with fishing, so not a lot of cropland to just kind of take care of. Now, Sparta was an oligarchy. And if you done forgot what an oligarchy, circle Q, is a form of government in which few people hold power, which is great, depending on who the few people are in charge. If you've got a lot of intelligent, smart people, then your society will arguably do good. If you've got a lot of deadbeats running the government, probably going to explode on itself. Sparta was officially ruled by two kings who jointly led the army, but elected officials ran Spartans' day-to-day activities and handled dealings between Sparta and other Greek city-states, maybe even Athens. Now, the Spartan government kept foreign travelers out and discouraged its own citizens from traveling. Why? To maintain control of their country, and to keep their bloodline pure. They did not want their bloodline diluted by outsiders, by foreigners. They wanted to keep their physical specimens within the Spartan city-state of Greece, not diluted. You want the best of the best, hence why they got rid of unhealthy babies when they were born. Now, let's talk about Athens for a second. Spartans' main rivalry at its best in Greece was Athens. And although Athens had a powerful military, it valued physical training. Athenians also prized your thinking power, education, clear thinking, the arts. They believed that studying the arts made people, well, better citizens. So basically, what you have developing here, you have the brains, the nerds, the Athenians, versus the jocks, the athletes, the Spartans. Now, let's talk about how the differences arose in these two city-states. For example, boys in Athens, instead of training at age 7, like in Sparta, boys in Athens attended school to learn reading, writing, and arithmetic. We're going to outwit you. We're going to outsmart you there in Athens. Boys from rich families often had private tutors who taught them philosophy, geometry, astronomy, and other subjects, as well as public speaking. This is where the democracy comes in and the equality in their government. Boys from poor families, however, did not receive much of an education. And, well, girls, I'm sorry, like I said earlier, or hinted to, or alluded to earlier, you almost got none in the city-state of Athens. Despite Athens' reputation for freedom and democracy, Athenian women, well, you had almost no right, which is ironic because if you think that the Athenians were educated and they were very educated, then they would give equal rights to the females. But they didn't. But Sparta did. So it's kind of a mismatch in the philosophy here. Athenian girls learned household duties from their mothers, how to keep a house, take care of the children, run those types of duties. Some wealthy girls learned reading, writing, and playing the lyre, kind of a version of a harp there. The government of early Athens was indeed an oligarchy, but because of their education, because of their prowess, Athens later became a democracy. Well, as you can see, these two societies, brains versus brawn, they're building up to really an epic showdown. Athens joined forces with other city-states to form the Delian League. Circle A. Need to know that for the quiz, need to know for the test. The Delian League promised to defend its members against the Persians. Kind of like an ancient version day of the United Nations, the UN. Athens, although because of their prowess, because of their education, because of their smart, uh, Athens eventually gained control, maybe even through manipulation of the Delian League. They controlled it. The Athenians even moved the Delian League from Delos, a neutral location, to the city-state of Athens itself. In the 400s BC, the populations of Athens exploded. It was about 285,000 people. And that may not sound like a large number today, but this made Athens by far the largest of all Greek city-states on the Greek peninsula and beyond. Most Athenian homes had at least one slave, and if you're wealthy, your family had, many slaves. Athenian farmers, remember the farmland, not so great on the mainland Greece, but Greek people did farm. The Athenian farmers grew things as grain, vegetables, fruit, olives, and even grapes. And grapes are very important because in the ancient world, you can turn grapes into wine. With its navy protecting the islands, Athens, the most powerful member, has the biggest population of the league. Soon the Athenians begin to treat other city-states as, subjects. It's kind of like sticking your nose up in the air and thinking, I'm just better than you. That's what the Athenians believe. Other city-states, as you can imagine, along with the mighty physicality of Sparta, became suspicious of Athens. Well, they should be because, remember, If you are as intelligent as the Athenians were, they probably were up to something. These city-states eventually joined together against Athens, and the war that broke out is known as the Peloponnesian War. Circle G, know that for the quiz, know that for the test. So it's basically us versus Athens. Now, and it was a long Peloponnesian War that followed, the Athenians won a lot of battles at first, believe it or not, even against the physicality of the Spartans. Because there was little farmland now, Athens, remember, they had to import this grain. They live on the peninsula. It was rocky, it was rugged, just not a lot of farmland. So they're importing. That means bringing in. Kind of look at the picture here. That's their city state, surrounded by walls. They have to bring in outside foods in order to feed that massive population of 285,000 people. Athenians outside the city walls even had to move inside the city to protect themselves. So there's a couple of things building up in the favor of Sparta actually here. Athens has a large population. When you put a large population behind four walls, even though it may be spaced out very good, it only takes one little virus, one little illness to start to affect everybody within the walls. Sickness broke out. The other thing is, if you have pulled in all of your farmers from the outside where the farmland existed into those walls, and there's very little farmland inside the walls, you're cutting off your food supply. And remember, there's importing a lot of your food to feed your large population. So you got a couple of things working against the Athenians. In the second year of the war, disease broke out and killed more than 1/3 of people inside the Athenian walls. Remember, you get 285,000 people inside these four walls, even though you could space it out the best way possible. It was just a matter of time before disease could break out. On the other thing, as smart as the Athenians were, they made a bad deal with Sparta. Sparta made a deal with the Athenians to build a navy. Okay, we'll let you build a navy. Sparta, I should say, Sparta was outsmarting the Athenians. They built a navy, and you know what they did? They formed a blockade. And the Spartan navy defeated the Athenian navy, which bought in this imported food, this imported grain to Athens. The Athenians were struck by disease, 1/3 of their population killed. And now, since you made a bad deal with the Spartans, they built up this navy. They've cut off your food supply. And now the people that did not get killed by the disease, they're starving inside your city walls. Athens had nothing to do but wave the white flag and really surrender. For about 30 years after this, the Spartans controlled nearly all of Greece. But resentment from other city-states even led to a long period of war that weakened all of Greece and left it open from attack from the outside. So, even though the Greeks banded together during the Persian Wars to defeat the Persians, they were stronger together. After that was over, they started fighting among themselves, and when they split apart, they are weakened beyond repair. And that's really what happened in the Peloponnesian War. Hopefully, you learned a little bit something today. Maybe that Spartan boys trained in the military starting at age 7. Sparta was known for its physicality, its strength, while Athens was known for its brain power. Hopefully, you learned something today. Until next time, stay safe, God bless, and as always from Coach Hughes, a big roll tide.